Well, we got news of, things. So I really do like the Shin Megami Tensei series. So I guess that also makes me a Persona fan. But I do play a lot of the Persona games. And because of that, I also played, well, these games. The arena games? Very good couple of games. Persona Q? It was alright. Kinda wish I was playing Atrian Odyssey instead, since it's just the same thing, only not as enjoyable. Dancing All Night? Easily the worst thing to come out of the Persona series. So I guess you can say I'm not really a big fan of the spin-offs, especially when every single game is canon. But the recent news are indeed, well, news. So Dancing All Night is getting a sequel. Actually, scratch that. 2 sequels, with them being based off Persona 5 and Persona 3. Along the news of the 2 games, we're also getting a Persona Q2. Yay? Now, I do plan on talking about all the Persona games in the future, so I don't want to go into too much detail of how I feel towards Persona Q and Dancing All Night. But I think I should talk a little about Dancing All Night since I don't think it's a very good game, and there's going to be 2 more games like that one. That in, so I can get back to the TMS video I promised. Don't worry guys, I'm still working on it. So Dancing All Night is a game where you press the D-pad and face buttons, somewhat in rhythm of whatever song is playing in the background. That is, if you can even figure out what you're supposed to be in rhythm with. Since the game can never make up its mind on what notes to be in rhythm with throughout the song, sometimes being in rhythm with things you can barely make out with the other instruments and vocals drowning it out. Not to mention notes are sometimes questionable if they really are in rhythm or not. You also need to keep in rhythm well enough for the game to deem you worthy enough, making the game have 2 fail states. By either really sucking at the song and making too many mistakes, or not pleasing the crowd enough. It's not a new idea. In fact, it's very similar to the Project Diva games, and it works in those games. At first, it's not too terrible in Dancing All Night either, but the harder difficulties really punish you for a single mistake, and it really makes you work for that recovery. But it doesn't even matter when the game is so easy to exploit. And overall, I really don't like the game's track list, which that of course is more of a me problem, but it's because of that I really didn't enjoy Dancing All Night all that much. So what are my thoughts on the new Persona dancing games? On the surface, it'd probably be a safe guess that I don't want any more dancing all whatever time of the day it is games. But in all honesty, I'm glad there's going to be at least one more game. Well, yes, I really didn't like the first game, but I feel if they fixed the problems with the first game, I think it'd be a really enjoyable rhythm game to play. Well, for the most part, I really didn't have fun with Dancing All Night, but for the few songs I did like, I really enjoyed playing the game. All 4 of the songs. Just 4 songs out of the whole track list, which I feel is probably Dancing All Night's biggest crime. Most of the songs weren't fun to play in rhythm game form, or simply just songs I didn't like. As I said before, this is really more of a personal taste, so it really isn't something that can be easily improved. But the new Dancing All Time to Get a New Watch games have a bit of an advantage with each of them being based off a different Persona game. With the post-Nocturne Persona games, each one hosts its own musical style, with 3 having more of a bluesy hip-hop OST, 4 having a more J-pop sound, and 5 having a heavy focus on jazz. Because of this, each of the Persona rhythm games could have their own identity when it comes to their track lists, or so one would think. While Persona 4 had a very J-pop sounding soundtrack, a lot of remixes in Dancing All Night really weren't J-pop-ish, and would be a bit more experimental of the music genres. While it does make sense to mix up the genres just a little for a standalone rhythm game, we now have 2 new Dancing All First Thing We See in the Night Sky, with both of them being released at the same time. Since they're basically releasing 2 of the same game at the same time, I think it's safer for each of them to stick with a set sound, to make $40 to $60 DLC packs sound a bit more reasonable. Releasing 2 carbon copies of the same game at the same time, with the only real difference being the story and characters, isn't really a grand idea to do. Especially when these games are going to more than likely be canon, which is already a bit of a worry for certain reasons that I'm not going to get into because spoiler reasons. Although they could just say they're easily not canon. I also feel that the new Dancing All Dark Hour games need to keep the notes rhythms to match the song's beat or to the lyrics of the song. I mean, it sounds like a no-brainer. It might just be a problem that I mostly noticed, even for me to say, well, it could just be me, writing off as something I could be wrong about, since I have some really strong self-confidence. But after getting footage of the game, I'm pretty sure I'm not wrong about that. So while it's not the most exciting news, or the most surprising, I'm still hopeful that the new Persona rhythm games will be more enjoyable, since I always enjoy a good rhythm game, and possibly keep me busy until Atlus finishes remaking the best Persona game to ever exist, which they are most certainly making. Right? So you might be wondering why I haven't spoken much about Persona Q2, and there's a reason for that. There's only so much I can talk about static image. So what are your thoughts on the new Persona news? Are you looking forward to the new Persona games? Or are you here to tell me just how horrible I am for not liking Dancing All Night? Do feel free to leave your thoughts in the comment section. And do have a nice day, maybe, possibly, I don't know. Outro.